Hi.
Hello again.
We are in the Proclaimer's book, page 30. The subheading is No Part of the World. It's just 2 paragraphs and a box that we're going to do. The first paragraph says, to fulfill their responsibility to make disciples and to be witnesses of God and Christ, first-century Christians could not allow themselves to be distracted by worldly affairs. They had to keep their commission in clear focus. Jesus certainly had done so. To Pilate he said, "My kingdom is no part of this world." And to his disciples he plainly stated, "You are no part of the world." Like Jesus, then, the early Christians kept separate from the world. They did not get involved in politics or war. All references in John. Neither did they get caught up in the ways of the world, its eager pursuit of material things and its overindulgence in pleasure.
Because they kept separate from the world, the first century Christian witnesses were a distinctive people. Notes historian E.G. Hardy in his book, Christianity and the Roman Government. The Christians were strangers and pilgrims in the world around them. Their citizenship was in heaven. The kingdom to which they looked was not of this world. The consequent want of interest in public affairs came thus from the outset to be a noticeable feature in Christianity.
And that's the end of his quote. In the box it says, the triumphs of Christianity. Extra-biblical sources confirm the fine conduct and love that characterized the early Christians. Historian John Lord stated, quote, the true triumphs of Christianity were seen in making good men of those who professed her doctrines. We have testimony to their blameless lives, to their irreproachable morals, to their good citizenship, and to their Christian graces. And that's from a book called The Old Roman World.
Yeah, and I don't have serious issue with most of what's being said here, but the problem is when you're a witness, you don't realize that there's a chronological fog you're fighting through here, i.e. the quotes from Hardy and Lord. What period of time are they talking about? And because that's not clear, you're left to assume here they're talking about the very first century. But the reference to extra-biblical sources gives that away as to what period they're talking about, because there's very few extra-biblical sources for the first century. Mm-hmm. The extra-biblical sources are in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries. Yeah. So then we're talking about a period of time, generally, later than the New Testament period, and yet the Christians are being marked by the difference that their lives made, how different they were than the people around them, including the Jews, in some aspects. So because that fog is still there when you're a witness, you don't realize that this people that are being praised for being different are the same people you think of in the next chapter who have already developed this so-called great apostasy. The same people who you think are preaching and teaching the wrong doctrines are the people being praised here for their exemplary lives.
And when you think of the first century Christians, most of those were part of Jewish society. Yeah. So you don't really need to witness to them about God. You have to witness to them about the Christ, who the Christ is.
And this idea of them not having any interest in public affairs, well, they did, because they were mostly Jews, the ones we read about in the New Testament. They had a government. They had 2 governments,
the
actually.
Sanhedrin,
they had the Sanhedrin, they had the Jewish system, if they lived in Palestine, as their immediate government that they had to deal with. So their affairs were ordered. Yeah. And they were under then the jurisdiction of Rome, of course, both in Palestine and elsewhere.
And again, that's where you have to place things in the time. It's not like they could decide, I think I'll get involved with politics. They're under the Romans. They don't have any choices there. They're under them. And
they're under the Jewish brethren too. They're they're being persecuted by their Jewish brethren for their biblical period, right up into the end of the New Testament. Their big conflict is with their fellow Jews, not with Rome. So when you think of the rule of government, you realize that there's even a shift within the New Testament period from the book of Acts, let's say, to Revelation. You have Romans 13 written closer to the situation in the book of Acts, where we're told to be subject to the superior authorities because they're God's servant. And that's the way it plays out in the book of Acts, that the Roman government is actually protecting the Christians against the Jews. But then by 95, when the Gospel of John, which is referenced here, comes to be, the situation's changed. Now the Emperor Domitian is asking to be worshipped. He is the one claiming to be the Son of God, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So all of those statements about the true King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Christ, in Revelation, and in this part of John that they're citing here, my kingdom is no part of this world. All these references have to be put against the backdrop of the emperor claiming divine authority. But this is complicated, and because of the fog that you're in as a Jehovah's Witness, the 250-year gap between the apostles and Constantine, you don't realize the situation keeps changing. And so by the time of Constantine, they're being invited to be contributors.
Yeah, because
they're still a minority, but there's something like 20 million Christians in the world, and maybe a tenth of the total population of the Roman Empire is now Christian. So when you're that big a minority...
Yeah, and also their moral strength was obvious to people, so they saw the benefits of this group.
So the big difference, though, is, of course, while they're still primarily Jewish, built around the Jewish church, the synagogue, around the Roman world, they have a government in place, but the situation changes when the Roman government destroys the Jewish system of things in the year 70, and then finally destroys Jerusalem itself around the year 135. The situation has changed, so Christians start to think about, okay, now what does the situation demand of us as the church continues to grow in size and influence? I think, therefore, the quotes by Hardy and Lord have to be put in the context of which time they're talking about. Obviously, the Christians were living exemplary lives and setting a great example that the Romans couldn't gainsay for 200 years after, you think, as a witness, this great apostasy developed.
Yeah.
So there being no part of the world, in what sense? They're not living like worldlings.
Yeah, and I think you don't think about that. When do you think, you've got a figure or a date in mind when the apostasy starts, and you're saying that they're a model here of no part of the world. Same people, same time. How does that work? Well,
that's what we need to think about, because even today we're in a situation, again, like even the witnesses are, right? That you've made a video, which we'll link, about the fact that the Watchtower itself has changed its opinion on the role of government several times within 100 years.
Specifically the Romans 13:1 reference.
Yeah. So we'll put that in as a link, Vivian's video on the changing opinion of the Watchtower in respect to the relationship between their religion and the government. And also we'll put in a link to what the difference Christians have made who have been in government, like William Wilberforce and some of the Clapham sect, and Lord Shaftesbury. We'll put in a link to a playlist we've done called What Has Christ Been Doing These 2,000 Years, specifically the first video on William Wilberforce, who was a member of Parliament when he became a Christian, and what difference he made to the world.